So in this segment, we're going to be talking about Lisa Nandy warns Labour voters any idea of reversing Brexit is a fantasy. So a senior Labour figure has dismissed the idea that rejoining the EU is a fantasy, but said the party will set out how it will change the relationship with the bloc before the next election. Well, hopefully that'll be soon, because they keep saying they keep saying what they're against, like freedom of movement, but not what they're really for. And Labour is walking a tightrope. They are trying to get pro Brexit voters, but doing this is really going to alienate a lot more voters than they think in certain parts of England. That's for sure, and also Scotland as well. Potentially Wales. Lisa Nandy's warning that Labour was heading for a backlash from Leave voters in its former heartlands, and the last election proved accurate when Labour suffered their worst election defeat since 1935. It's a lot more than that. People really didn't like Corbyn. Like, he was deeply, deeply hated, and that's what a lot of us didn't acknowledge. Johnson also fed into the xenophobia of the Red Wall, or at least certain parts of the Red Wall, along with promising levelling up. Like, he pretended he actually cared about regions in northern England. It was more than just Brexit. It was this is simplistic analysis from Nandy or whoever wrote this, especially since Labour's vote had been in decline for a long time now within the Red Wall, with kind of, I think, lower turnout and Labour winning less and less vote share. So to argue it's just down to Brexit doesn't make sense. They were victim to the Tories having a really charismatic candidate who really appealed to Red Wall voters via xenophobia and levelling up, and it worked. Whatever you have to say about Johnson, his strategy worked beautifully, his and Dominic Cummings' strategy. Today, the Shadow Levelling Up Secretary dismisses those like Labour Mayor Sadiq Khan, who has called for the UK to rejoin the EU single market, as pushing a fantasy. Now, we know the UK can't rejoin the single market. I've already covered that at length. If it was possible, it would take the country forward economically and internationally, but she says it won't take the country forward. But Labour won't acknowledge that. But I guess they want to move beyond Brexit, which is really difficult given the damage that Brexit has done to the country. She denies, however, that Brexit is electorally toxic for Labour, and promises it will set out how it will achieve a closer, more productive relationship with its single biggest trading partner before the next poll. Brexit is politically toxic for Labour, hence why they're running on the Brexit policies they are. Nandy has moaned about EU workers, and Labour constantly bemoaned freedom of movement more recently. Just because you avoid a topic does not make it less toxic, or because you avoid a topic completely. Like, this is childish. On the critical issue of how much power to give away to local leaders, including on keeping revenues from tax raised in their area, it's probable that they will agree with each other more than with many in their own party. This is talking about Nandy and Rachel Reeves. Nandy insists that reports Rachel Reeves, the Shadow Chancellor, is blocking her plans are wide of the mark. However, Reeves certainly hasn't blocked anything we want to do. There's an obvious need for investment, and we're acutely aware of this. So I doubt anything was blocked, as they're still probably in the don't know phase of what they actually want to do. Nandy looks like she believes in more regional control. Reeves, being the potential future Chancellor, would want more central control, as that would give her more power to make decisions and have more money to do so. This could lead to an issue with Starmer proposing the, quote, take back control bill, but that's another video. She and I are of the view, so Nandy and Reeves are of the view, that we spend far too much money on housing benefit, particularly housing benefit that subsidises poor quality housing in the private rented sector, and far too little on house building. There are a lot of landlords who benefit from this system, as the government actually subsidises private rents via housing benefit in a way. The Tories also cut a lot of council funding, and councils don't enforce rules around bad and unsafe housing. You have examples of councils being contacted over black mould and other really bad issues that can cause really bad illnesses, and some councils haven't done anything about it. Unsurprisingly, she insists that there are profound differences between Labour's approach and the Tories. They call it levelling up, we call it rebuilding Britain, getting every part of the economy contributing to the economic success. We call it rebuilding Britain. Okay, cool. This is not just about receipts of growth, but it being able to make an active contribution to that growth, which is what's been missing in quite some time. And not everything has to be about the economy. You could also talk about making sure people have good social services, local parks, or other public places, amongst other things. It's not everyday GDP. And, what if you said, we can get rid of British farming and increase our manufacturing, really improve our industrialisation, because it'll improve our GDP, but then you would get rid of our food security. It's just ridiculous. Nandy's big idea is that people need to feel much more ownership of the decisions that affect them, and politics won't work properly until they do. What if people want to set up a new grammar school, something Labour opposes, or block desperately needed housing in their area? Isn't everyone in favour of so-called localism up to the moment the locals do the wrong thing? This is bizarre. Should local areas be able to set up grammar schools if the government doesn't support them? What if local people want to bring back hanging, for example? Should they be able to do that as well? Localism is good, but then you run into probably the most annoying people in this country, NIMBYs, not in my backyards, people that don't want new housing or anything that will lower their house value. How do you deal with them? They don't want more onshore wind farms or nuclear power plants. At a certain point, localism doesn't work. And she says, I think that's a really dim view of the way people are. People want this country to do well. She's not talking about my views. They want the communities to succeed. They want to say in how those decisions are made, and they want to be able to shape the future of their families, their communities, and their country. And having more local power is a good thing. More local mayors, perhaps, given that Andy Burnham seems to be doing an okay job. It looks to be combining better public transport with congestion zones. But I don't live in Manchester, so I don't have an extensive knowledge of what Burnham has done. But maybe having more mayors who are locally accountable, who can be a good thing, because they will probably have to interact with the local people, something MPs, mainly in safety, don't really have to do. They predominantly spend their time in London rather than in their constituencies. It's just the nature of the job. In her book, Nandy's book, All In: How We Build a Country That Works, she argues that the biggest decision for a generation to leave the EU was rooted in people's frustration at being unable to influence things that can affect them. And another MP who has time to write a book, a shadow minister at that. Also, take back control to do what? We know immigration was key for the Leave campaign. Please explain to me how immigration was impacting these people that much. Plus, these people aimed their anger at the wrong people. I'm not saying all Brexiteers are racist, but race played a key part in it. So I ask you again, take back control to do what? It's like those people who said, make America great again. When was America great? Who was it great for? These people want more local control, but to do what? That's the question. Pressure is growing on Labour to say more about their promise to improve the deal struck by Johnson 3 years ago, as polls show a growing number believe the decision was a mistake. Nandy acknowledges, however, that the party will have to give voters a clearer idea of its objectives, which she says will include aligning standards with the EU to improve access to its markets. She points out Labour has already said it would seek to get a veterinary agreement to ease the problems with Brexit and with the Northern Ireland Protocol, which is good stuff, an agreement on defence and security, again, fine. Pressed on what it might spell out, she says, I think there's a strong case for something around universities. We want to see greater collaboration. So that could be about Erasmus, that could be about Horizon. We have no idea. A vet agreement is fine, but something on unis is so vague, maybe Erasmus with a different name. Maybe it's British Erasmus, I don't know. But clearly they have not thought much about it, and maybe this is a throwaway comment, but at some point, being pro-business and getting what EU alignment will hit mortgage man's desire to have nothing to do with the EU, and how do you square the circle? That's the key question that I think Labour are going to have to figure out real quick. But, they might botch this because, again, the next election's almost guaranteed for them. If they don't win the next election, then there really is no hope for this country. Really is no hope. And, we've seen two kind of very left-wing parties in Corbyn fail, and we've seen kind of three centre-left parties fail with, Brown's Labour, Miliband's Labour, and then if Starmer loses, that'd be Starmer's Labour as well. So maybe the problem isn't just the Labour Party, despite Corbyn being deeply unpopular, it's just maybe the electorate really love voting for pain. I don't know. Some people enjoy that sort of thing from what I've heard. But anyways, let me know what you think in the comments below. Like, comment, share, subscribe, support the channel on Patreon if you can, and hopefully I'll see you in the next one.